Welcome to the launch of the Falcon Heavy for the ViaSat mission. This is the second attempt that SpaceX is making to launch this rocket vehicle. If you remember, just 2 days ago, they were preparing for a double-header launch with also the Falcon 9 launching on the same day, actually within an hour of each other. But unfortunately, the Falcon Heavy didn't quite get off the pad. The Falcon 9 did just fine. It performed its mission nominally, but the Falcon Heavy unfortunately had an issue with the last minute of the countdown, and there was an abort called at minus 59 seconds. But all hope is not lost. We're back here today to hopefully see this rocket launch this time. If you don't know who I am, I'm Josiah. I am the chief engineer at a student rocket group called ASTRA, which operates out of Bremen. And yeah, we like to hang out and watch some of these launches every once in a while just to, get some inspiration from the commercial launch sector, but also to have an opportunity to interact with you guys, talk about what's going on at Astra. And also, if you have any questions about rocketry or the rocket launch that we're talking about today, which is, of course, the Falcon 9, the Falcon Heavy. And yeah, if any questions about rocketry in general, you can always just ask. This is kind of our opportunity to hang out and talk rocket science. So yeah, today we have, of course, the Falcon Heavy launching. Right now, things are looking good for a launch. We're about 95% good weather, according to the last Twitter update from SpaceX. So it is definitely looking good from that end. Not really sure what happened with the abort that was called 2 days ago, but I'm sure they worked out that problem. We have to remember that the Falcon Heavy is a little bit of a younger launch vehicle compared to the Falcon 9, so there are still some technical things that come up every once in a while. The Falcon Heavy is not something that flies every day. It's kind of a more uncommon launch vehicle in SpaceX's fleet. The Falcon 9, of course, gets flown almost on a weekly basis, but the Falcon Heavy usually only gets a couple flights a year. So it's always a little bit special when we get to see this wonderful rocket fly. It is, after all, the second most powerful rocket that is currently operating. The only rocket that supersedes that one is the SLS, which, of course, has only flown once. So the Falcon Heavy is kind of the only regular flying rocket, sort of, that is of this heavy nature right now. The rocket is going to be launching from Cape Canaveral, actually from the same pad they fly the astronauts from. So you will see the tower that they use to get the astronauts into the space capsule. Of course, it's not in use right now. There's no people that are flying on this mission. It is a satellite which is going to geostationary orbit. And the satellite is going to be inserted directly into geostationary orbit, which is also a bit unique and is showcasing the capabilities of the Falcon Heavy vehicle in general. What does this mean, really? Well, in most cases, when you're going to geostationary orbit, the launch vehicle will just fly you into what's called a geostationary transfer orbit, which is an elliptical orbit between the low Earth orbit and the big geostationary orbit. So it makes this like big oval. But unfortunately, if you're a satellite, you don't want to just put yourself into that elliptical orbit. You actually want to get into that big geostationary orbit in the end. So you have to circularize. And usually payloads will bring their own fuel so that they can do this maneuver. But the Falcon Heavy has such a high payload capacity that it can actually insert these payloads directly into geostationary orbit. So it'll actually coast all the way up to the top of the transfer orbit and then do the circularization, and then the mission is over. So it's kind of a really long mission. But yeah, it's really cool that the Falcon Heavy is able to do this. Yes, that's a good point. Today we do have quote-unquote naked boosters. And the reason for that is that the Falcon Heavy will actually be completely expending itself this time. So there's not going to be any attempted landings. The boosters are not going to try to fly back to the launch pad. Instead, they are going to kind of suicide themselves and crash into the ocean. And the reason for this is that they're trying to get every last bit of performance out of the Falcon Heavy right now. And that's what it needs in order to get the payload, that is this ViaSat-3 Americas satellite, all the way to geostationary orbit. It's a pretty heavy one. It's 6.7 tons. So typically, typically a normal launch vehicle would barely even be able to put that into the elliptical orbit. So the fact that the Heavy can take it all the way to geostationary is pretty crazy. I believe it's also one of the heaviest satellites that's ever been put into geostationary orbit. So it is definitely a monumental mission in that regard. And it's pretty crazy that they still build satellites this big, because typically satellites have been kind of getting smaller as the years have gone by. So it's interesting to see every once in a while one of these massive satellites get flown. Yeah. One thing that'll also be interesting about the rocket is you'll notice that it shows a bit of age. The two boosters that are flying on this vehicle are actually of different ages. So one of them is a bit newer and has only been flown 3 times, but the other one has been flown 8 times. So once they give us the live cast and you see the rocket, you'll notice that one of the boosters is kind of white and the other one is a bit more on the black side. And that's just because of the soot that gets deposited onto the booster on each of the relanding attempts. This is something that happens when they relight the engines while it's flying back to the launch pad. What happens is basically all the black soot from the firing the rocket gets deposited back on itself because it's like flying through its exhaust plume. But don't worry, it's still fully functional. There's no issues with the coloring or anything. It's just merely a cosmetic thing in the end. So yeah, that's kind of the rundown of what's going to happen today. Hopefully we're going to get to see a launch that will actually work out. I expect that there will probably be, in terms of the launch window, the window actually started about 30 minutes ago or so. So we're already well into the launch window of what this rocket has. That launch window will end in about 35 minutes. And basically SpaceX has pushed their launch all the way to the end of that launch window. So I don't get freaked out if there is a call of an abort or something like that. We probably won't have a launch today, basically, because they'll have one chance to cycle through this launch cycle. And if they miss a target, basically they will have to push to another day. Yeah, the asymmetrical reentry marks are definitely interesting and give each of the boosters a bit of character. So it's kind of a cool little bit of character that gets added into each of the boosters as they get more flight experience. Yeah. Unfortunately, these boosters won't get to add anything more to their experience, but it is a first that Falcon Heavy completely expends itself. So in a way, they're kind of like putting the Falcon Heavy to the absolute maximum of its performance. So it's kind of like almost like a stress test, you know? I don't think that SpaceX likes to fly in this mode, just because, you know, they're used to reusing the boosters and stuff. But ViaSat has paid them extra to allow them to expend the boosters, so to say. So, hey, the customer's always right. And that's why they push it to this extreme in this case. Yeah, in the future, that won't necessarily be necessary because Starship should be able to handle this type of a mission relatively easily, I would say. All it would need to do is just refuel in low Earth orbit, and then you could send a satellite that big or even much bigger to these types of orbits, no problem. But for now, this is the the best that SpaceX has in terms of operational capability. So we're looking forward to what that's going to look like up in this next launch here. All right. I'm going to try and get this clock working so that it's actually showing an accurate time here. Let's see here. So we should be counting down to a launch now. According to the latest Twitter update from SpaceX, we should have a launch coming in about T-minus 28 minutes. So that's basically the end of the launch window that they have. So there'll be nothing more in terms of their ability to recycle beyond this point. So just keep that in mind. In the meantime, we can talk a little bit about the launch vehicle itself and what makes the Falcon 9 a bit special. We don't get to see it fly that many times, so sometimes we might have forgotten some of the things that are unique and special about this vehicle. So here you can see that it's basically just a Falcon 9 that has 2 more Falcon 9 boosters strapped to the side of it. So it has the same height, and all of the cores have the same diameter. Of course, it's just a lot bigger in terms of mass, and of course it has much higher payload capabilities to low Earth orbit and to geostationary transfer orbit and so on. And of course, the staging sequence is a little bit different because instead of just having 2 stages with the core burning and then a separation and then the second stage taking over, now we have those side boosters, which will kind of be extra half stage. So they will actually burn out first. They'll get detached radially, and then that core stage will go for a little bit more, and then you'll see the separation, and then the second stage will carry on from there. So yeah, that's kind of the rundown of the Falcon Heavy statistics and what she's capable of handling. One thing that we should think about as well is the sequence of how the events will occur. So here you see that, of course, in about 25 minutes here, we're going to see the liftoff. Then, as I said before, we're going to have that booster separation. That's going to happen at roughly T plus 3 minutes. So those boosters will be detached radially. And as I said before, they're not going to get reused. So those are just going to fall back down into the ocean. What would be cool, though, is if they do still leave the cameras on, it would be nice to see those boosters crash into the ocean. But I'm not sure exactly what SpaceX will be showing in the video because they've never flown this type of mission before. So yeah, we'll see what they do in the end. Now, typically those boosters would light and then fly back to the launch site, but this part will not be happening in the launch sequence, so you can just ignore that. That center stage will continue to burn, though. Then that main core is going to cut off, and the second stage will basically carry on and keep pushing that payload into orbit. And then after that, you'll see the payload fairing deploy. And the mission is not classified, so they will still have a camera on it. So you will get to see the rest of the mission from there. And then they're going to perform a couple more maneuvers that are going to take them up into that elliptical orbit. And then about half a day later, they're going to do that circularization burn once they get to Apoapsis. And then, of course, as a reminder, this booster landing will not be occurring. So we will not see a booster landing today. So yeah, those boosters are actually naked. They don't have any landing gear on them at all. They don't have any grid fins. They don't have any landing legs. I don't even think they have the thrust controllers. I'll show you what I'm talking about here. So they don't have any. So here you can see the typical configuration of a booster. So in this case, they're not going to have any landing legs. They're not going to have any of the grid fins. They're also not going to have cold gas thruster packs. So basically everything that the vehicle uses as a recovery method will just not be there. And yeah, as you're saying there, it's going to look really weird, of course, without seeing those things on the vehicle, because those are just, they become kind of synonymous with a SpaceX launch. But you know, it's kind of like a throwback to the old days when they would just launch these bare rockets. And then when they put landing legs on it for the first time, that's what we thought was weird, right? So I guess it's kind of good that we've gotten used to rockets landing. I think it's a definite marker that SpaceX has really pushed the industry forward and created a new expectation for how rockets should look. They should land themselves again. They should come back. We should be able to refly them, you know? Yeah. As a testament, though, to how much SpaceX has achieved in the last 10 years, you can kind of get a good idea of that just by looking at their launch progress over the past year. Sorry, over the past 10 years. So at the start, they were only launching like, you know, a couple of rockets a year. And that has really exponentially expanded to the point where last year they launched 61 rockets. And this year, they're probably going to break that and might even get close to 100 rockets. We'll see. But right now, so far, they've already launched 27 rockets. So, and it's still just April. So that's pretty amazing that they're continuing to excel at this crazy pace. And it really is a testament to how much the space industry is expanding right now. And it just goes to show you that, you know, if you innovate and try to do new things like building recoverable vehicles, the market responds very well to that. So for those just joining, we are here covering the Falcon Heavy launch of the ViaSat Americas mission. This is a mission that's going to geostationary orbit, and we're expecting it to take off in just over 20 minutes now. This is all part of a launch window that started about 40 minutes ago, and it will expire in 20 minutes. So SpaceX has basically pushed the launch of this right to the end of the launch window. The reason for this is so that they can optimize the weather. At this time, they are 95% favorable for the weather conditions. So from that perspective, it is hopefully looking like we'll get to see a rocket fly today. If you remember back about 2 days ago, we were hopefully going to be able to see 2 rockets launch, one of them being the Falcon Heavy. But unfortunately, the Falcon Heavy experienced an abort on the launch pad just 59 seconds from the launch time. So that resulted in the recycle to today. So hopefully that technical glitch is taken care of, and we are tracking towards a successful launch today. And I think we should be in a good place in terms of the rocket launch at this point. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. Now, I mentioned before that the Falcon Heavy is the second most powerful operational rocket right now. There is, of course, one rocket which is more powerful, which is the SLS rocket, which is designed and built by NASA and its commercial partners. But one of the key things about this is, you know, if you look at the Falcon Heavy in comparison to the SLS, yes, the SLS is a bit more powerful. It has a bit more capability. But where the big difference comes is in the cost, which is, you know, the Falcon Heavy only costs about $100 million in order to launch, whereas the SLS is costing somewhere around $2 billion. So it's like a cost difference of 20 times. So from a commercial perspective, I would say the Falcon Heavy is way more viable. And this is purely a result of SpaceX optimizing the rocket building process and taking advantage of economies of scale, and also them capitalizing on their reusability capability. Because, you know, if Falcon Heavy were to fly in its most optimum configuration, it would be able to recover most of its components. Of course, today that won't be happening. ViaSat has paid to have this satellite inserted directly into geostationary orbit, so we will not be recovering the vehicle. But I'm kind of interested to see what's going to happen with a completely expended Falcon Heavy vehicle. We're going to get to see it fly much faster with all of the boosters attached, and that might be interesting to see how that changes the behavior of the flight. And I would also be interested to see what the boosters look like as they crash back down to the Earth. But I'm not sure we're going to get to see that view. We'll see, though. Maybe I just hope SpaceX actually put a camera on it and shows it to us. You never know. Sometimes they do crazy things. So yeah, if you guys have any questions about the launch that's coming up here, or questions about rocketry in general, be sure to fire away. Also keep in mind that I'm from a student rocketry group called ASTRA in Bremen, and we're also working on rockets. And if you guys have any questions about that and what we're up to, also feel free to ask. We're always happy to field some questions about what's going on our end as well. It looks like the SpaceX stream is starting up, so I think we're gonna head on over there. Let's just see here. So we are just about 15 minutes away from launch. So we should expect them to start up and let us know what's up with the vehicle relatively soon. Again, for those just joining, this is the launch of the Falcon Heavy. It's going to be launching a mission called ViaSat-3 Americas. This is a communication satellite, which is part of an array, which is going to be 3 satellites, each positioned around the Earth in kind of a triangle. And that allows them to have full global coverage with just 3 satellites. Because remember, in geostationary orbit, the satellite basically sits above one spot on the Earth. So this satellite will be sitting right over the Americas, and it'll service that commercial market. The other 2 are positioned exactly in an equilateral triangle away from it. And with that array, they're able to basically serve the entire globe. And these satellites they're launching are like gigantic. This one weighs about 6.7 tons. And that's without the fuel that it needs to go up and circularize, because the Falcon Heavy in this mission will actually be sending it straight into geostationary orbit. Typically, when you send a satellite to geostationary orbit, you go into this transfer orbit, which is elliptical, which takes you from the low Earth orbit all the way up to the geostationary orbit. But the Falcon Heavy this time will actually be, instead of taking it on just onto the elliptical orbit, it's going to take it all the way up to the big orbit and circularize the satellite and deposit it, the full 6.7 tons, into that orbit. So this makes the ViaSat-3 Americas satellite actually one of the biggest satellites on orbit that is currently in geostationary orbit. So it's pretty crazy that Falcon 9 is actually able to pull this off. And yeah, I'm excited to see how the Falcon Heavy performs in this extreme circumstance where it basically expends everything. We will see it fly faster and more energetically than we've ever seen before. And it'll definitely put more strain on the vehicle structure. So we're definitely going to see a bit of a stress test, so to say, of the vehicle. So I'm kind of looking forward to that. And I hope no other weird variables come in and block the launch today. Really looking forward to seeing this thing fly.
Dragon, separation confirmed. Stage 1 is transonic. Landing legs have deployed.
One thing that would be nice to see in the future is a human-rated Falcon Heavy, because there's a lot you could accomplish with the Falcon Heavy in terms of human spaceflight.
Historic Launch Complex 39A at Kennedy Space Center, awaiting liftoff at 8:26 p.m. Eastern Time. Welcome back to our live.
There you see the white-black booster,
from SpaceX headquarters here in Hawthorne,
because
California.
one of them's a lot older.
My name is Atticus Videra, and I'm a propulsion engineer here at SpaceX. Now, if you joined us on Friday, you know we did get roughly to T-minus 59 seconds in the count when the vehicle called an abort. Aborts are a standard part of the countdown process. If the vehicle sees anything that's even slightly off, it'll abort the countdown to give teams on the ground extra time to review any potential issues before flight. The teams did work through these checks, and the vehicle and payloads are healthy. We are now looking forward to liftoff just a few minutes from now. Today we have 3 payloads on the mission. Those are ViaSat-3 as the primary payload for our customer, ViaSat. ViaSat-3 is expected to be the world's highest capacity satellite and will be the largest all-electric satellite ever to be launched. In addition to ViaSat-3, we also have 2 secondary payloads on board the second stage. Those 2 payloads are Astronis' micro-geo satellite and Gravity's CubeSat Gravity Space 1. Both are scheduled to deploy after ViaSat, which will be a few hours after liftoff. And as we mentioned during our last attempt, for this mission, we do need a lot of extra performance to help deliver these satellites to their final destination in a geostationary orbit high above the surface of the Earth. In order to do this, we will not be recovering the side boosters or the center core, and instead each will burn the fuel that we typically use for landing.
So sad.
Now, because we're not recovering the boosters or center core, there's no need for landing legs, which you'll notice on the bottom of your screen there have been removed. We've also removed the grid fins, and this is just to save a little bit of mass for some extra performance on the vehicle. Our Merlin vacuum engine today will light 3 times during this mission. The last burn will take place around the T plus 4 hour and 20-minute mark into flight. Deployments will wrap up about 25 minutes after the final burn, and that makes our mission duration for today just under 5 hours. At T-minus 10 minutes and 48 seconds, systems are currently a go for an on-time liftoff. The vehicle is nearly fully loaded with propellants, the range is green and ready to support. Now, if for some reason we do not launch today, we do have a backup opportunity tomorrow at the same time. Now at T-minus 10 minutes and 30 seconds and counting, let's take a closer look at the Falcon Heavy vehicle.
One thing that might be interesting, because of the time that they're launching, we might get to see the jellyfish effect, where basically because the vehicle is launching at dusk, it's kind of like darker on the ground, but as it flies up into the upper part of the atmosphere, the sun might be reflecting off of the exhaust gases, and that always creates a bit of a show. I think that we're pretty close to the time where that might happen, so just keep an eye out, and we might get to see a bit of a light show here. So keep an eye out.
Boosters has 9 Merlin 1D engines, making for a total of 27 engines across all 3 boosters, and you can see that incredible view on your screen. At full power, these 27 engines produce the same thrust as 18 747 airplanes at takeoff. The 27th engine is a Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage and will power the payload to its final targeted orbit. Once the first and second stage separate, the second stage will propel our payload to its intended orbit. You'll notice some gray paint on the second stage today, and that's just to help absorb some of the heat from the sun to keep our fuel warm during the long flight today. And above the second stage is where our payloads are safely enclosed inside of the fairing, and that's what
the fuel that they're trying to keep warm with that gray paint is the RP1. That is typically a fluid that's stored at room temperature, so they have to kind of keep it at that temperature so it doesn't freeze in space, which is actually a problem they could have while they're floating up to the apogee where they're going to do the circularization. So
today's launch marks the 100th flight of a reflown payload fairing. The ViaSat-3 America's mission also marks the very first Falcon Heavy to launch with flight-proven fairing halves. ViaSat-3 is the first of 3 satellites to make up a new global constellation. So here's more about today's mission and payload.
Center core.
Every mission starts with a vision.
It's nice to see that they're at least
Ours
recovering
is
the payload
simple and
fairings.
powerful. Break new ground in bringing connectivity where it's needed most.
At ViaSat, we attack very, very, very hard problems. But the harder the problem, the fewer people that can do that, and the more interesting it is to us.
The story of Viasat as a whole is a great story. We enable connectivity.
We say connecting the world, but that has a number of different meanings depending upon the type of customer you are.
From an end user like you or me sitting at home needing connectivity to do our homework, or to the connected passenger in an aircraft, to the Vice President, the President of the United States.
Our government customers are global customers. They go wherever they're needed, and they want to have the same type of capabilities everywhere they go.
For over 35 years,
Most of the Viasat customer base is going to be like government type stuff. I don't think this is one that is like super commercially available to the everyman. not like Starlink or something.
It's not going to happen. And so I'm really excited to say that's not.
Yeah, I guess it's nice that SpaceX launches all their rockets over ocean. So yeah, there's no chance that they will impact with a house or anything.
Flight 1 enables us to bring connectivity to the markets here in North America.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure China doesn't lob their rockets over populated areas anymore in the same way that they might have used to in the past. But yeah, definitely not a good idea to have hypergolic fuels flying towards populated areas. That's definitely not nice.
These enable us to generate well over 25 plus kilowatts of electrical power on orbit. That allows us to generate huge amounts of capacity that is then usable on the ground.
Those solar panels, by the way, are some of the biggest solar panels that have ever been on a geostationary satellite. They're absolutely gigantic.
Most of the people in the world only live in a very small fraction of the Earth. Yeah, we still want to be able to connect those people when they move from place to place.
ViaSat-3 is designed to move our capacity to where the demand is.
Our ability to move that bandwidth around and really service those dense spots, that's what our customers are looking for.
It's not just evolving, it's really like a revolution, making these big leaps in technology, and that's cool.
If you look at the progression from ViaSat-1 to ViaSat-2 to ViaSat-3, ViaSat-3 is actually the smallest satellite we've ever built, despite the fact that it's got multiples of capacity.
We took things that were twice the size of a human and brought it down to barely the size of a shoebox.
The satellite design process is no longer buy parts and boxes and hook them up. What we wanted was to invest in technology that can really scale. It's not just a new satellite design, it's a new way to build satellites.
We've had to reinvent all parts of the system.
I want to thank everybody at ViaSat for their role in what we're about to do today. And of course, I want to thank our partners at Boeing. We wouldn't be...
Also, that radio dish that they have, the big circular thing that is attached to the satellite, is like a giant radio array. It's actually pretty cool.
Unlocking opportunity for everyone, everywhere, starting now.
Like, just imagine how complicated that unfolding process is going to be when it gets to orbit. Like, it's going to be like James Webb, kind of, almost.
The clamp arms around the second stage will open, and then that truss structure next to the vehicle, known as the strongback, will start to retract away from the Falcon Heavy.
So the fueling process is almost over
you can see
now.
those clamp arms starting to open up underneath of the fairing on the second stage there. After this, the strongback will retract away from the vehicle, and this is to clear the way for ascent.
Just like the Falcon
Strongback
9.
is used to provide structural support as well as routing for fluids.
NY booster, lock load complete.
As well as routing for fluids and power to the vehicle.
So just like the Falcon 9, the Falcon Heavy is running on LOX and RP1, and all of its stages are running on these fuels.
We just heard LOX loading finished up on the PY booster. Next up at around T-minus 2 minutes, LOX loading will complete on the second stage. After LOX loading finishes loading onto the second stage, the entire vehicle will be completely full with 2.8 million pounds of propellant.
Center core, LOX load is complete.
You can also kind of hear there's a
Just
bit windy
hearing
there.
The various boosters finish up their LOX loading.
That tower on the right-hand side there is actually the crew tower. This is the same pad that they use to send the astronauts on the Dragon.
Looks like quite a nice day down there in Cape Canaveral. Weather is much more cooperative for this attempt today.
Obviously, they're not using that today because we're just launching a satellite, not launching people. The rocket looks kind of funny though with that black booster
Again,
and a
just
white
about 15
booster.
seconds, we will be completing LOX loading on the second stage, which will wrap up the propellant loading phase of our countdown.
It's like the rocket is trying to solve all our racial problems.
Second stage, LOX load is complete.
And there it is. Falcon Heavy is now fully loaded with 2.8 million pounds of propellant. Coming up next, we should see some white clouds venting from the TE LOX line. This is completely normal and part of our closeout process.
All right, it's looking good. I think we're...
Following this, the vehicle will enter startup at T-minus 1 minute. This is when the onboard flight computers take control of the countdown.
I really hope that the sun is in the right place, that we get
And shortly
a
after
bit
the
of a
vehicle
nice light
enters the
show.
startup phase, our LD or launch director should give the final go for launch. Let's listen in for those callouts.
If the sun is in the right place, we should get to see the sun reflecting off of the propellant. It could be, we're very close to the time of day where this happens, so it could be a more spectacular launch than we're expecting. Don't worry, it's not aliens.
Falcon Heavy is in startup.
There we go. Falcon Heavy has just entered the startup phase.
This is fantastic. We just passed the point where it aborted last time, so we're officially further.
Go for launch.
I think it's going to
And
launch.
with confirmation of go for launch from our launch director, Falcon Heavy is ready to go to space at T-minus 37 seconds with the ViaSat-3 mission.
This is it, guys. This is going to definitely go, I think. Now these boosters don't all ignite at once. The side boosters are actually going to start first, and then they're going to light that center core because it has so much power that it can actually tear itself apart.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engines full power.
Here we go, it's going. All right.
Go ViaSat, go Falcon Heavy.
Look at that thing take off the pad. My goodness.
Vehicle is pitching downrange.
M1D chamber pressure is nominal.
The second most powerful rocket in the world right now.
We are 30 seconds into flight under the power of 5 million pounds of thrust. Falcon Heavy is headed to space. Now we are throttling down our engines on those side boosters, and that's in preparation for Max Q.
Power into telemetry nominal.
Max Q is the moment of peak mechanical stress.
Falcon Heavy is supersonic.
Peak mechanical stress on the vehicle, so we do slow down the vehicle to get through this period of high stress. And once we pass through Max Q, we will throttle those engines back up on those side boosters.
Max Q.
They also burn the center core a little bit.
We have passed through Max Q.
A little bit
So we're going to
less.
throttle up those engines again on these side boosters.
They burn that center core a little bit less, so it still has fuel left over once the side boosters are let go of.
Along the telemetry on your left hand, on the bottom left hand of your screen.
Oh wow!
You can see the speed.
They gotta go back to that
altitude of
tracking
the
camera.
vehicle.
That was some amazing camera
incredible
work.
Views of Falcon Heavy in flight. Now, 2 minutes into flight, we will reduce the thrust on the 2 side boosters again, and that will be to decrease the forces on the vehicle structure. And that's because the vehicle is now lighter as we're burning through the fuel on the vehicle, but the thrust will remain constant.
So those boosters are going to separate in about a minute here.
And wow, that looks amazing on the screen. All 3 boosters burning bright there.
Absolutely phenomenal tracking
Falcon Heavy
here.
is following a nominal trajectory.
And good call out on trajectory. Now again, we're gonna throttle down the side boosters, and then the next event coming up in about a minute or just under a minute will be BECO. That's booster engine cutoff. That's where we will shut down the engines on the side boosters, and then we will.
They actually have to throttle down the side boosters in this phase because there's so much thrust to weight ratio that it can actually tear itself apart.
Needed on today's mission. And you can see on your right-hand screen, we do have a view of the separation mechanisms from the center core to the side boosters. And BECO, or booster engine cutoff, is coming up here.
Okay, here we go.
In a few seconds.
MVAC engine chill has started.
You can see the sun reflecting off of the upper level gases there.
Booster engine cutoff.
Side boosters
Boom.
separation confirmed. Both side boosters FTS is safed.
Absolutely gorgeous.
Great views there. We had BECO, booster engine cutoff, and we watched as those side boosters, and you could see them there on your screen, those side boosters falling
Vehicle
away.
is following a nominal trajectory.
So we are getting a bit of the jellyfish
Falcon Heavy
effect here.
center core.
Basically what's happening is that the exhaust gases from the
Awesome
booster
views.
are
That's
expanding.
going to wrap it up for the side boosters today. The next
And-
event coming up here in about 30 seconds or so is main engine cutoff. That is also called MECO, and that will be on the center core, followed by stage separation and then the startup of our second stage engine.
This totally looks like the aliens are landing, man. Holy crap. The tracking shot from the back like this is absolutely incredible. So this is happening because the sun is actually reflecting off of the
Main engine
exhaust
cutoff.
in the upper atmosphere.
Stage separation confirmed. Stage 1 FTS has safed.
And look at that crescent
MVAC ignition.
of the Earth.
Acquisition signal, Bermuda.
And we got some great views. We watched MECO as the engines on the center core shut down, stage separation, and now you can see on your screen that the MVAC engine has ignited. Now we are coming up on fairing separation.
Fairing separation confirmed.
Okay.
And also we're able to see and hear the call out that
Stage 2 is following a nominal trajectory.
the fairing halves have separated. They are now falling back down to Earth, and we will attempt to recover them using our recovery vessel, Doug.
Those fairings are going to be the only thing they recover this time. Everything else will be just crashing into the ocean, unfortunately.
And what you're looking at on your screen is a view on our second stage, looking aft at our MVAC engine. And our MVAC engine on the second stage is currently in the middle of its first burn. This burn has about a minute and a half left. After that, we'll have an additional 2 burns of our second stage engine before payload deployment. On your left-hand screen, you could see a map of the mission trajectory. And
They're
on the
just-
right-hand screen is a live view of the MVAC engine.
They're just flying due east right now.
As a reminder, our main payload for today's...
Stage 2 continues to follow a nominal trajectory.
Good call-outs. Our main payload for today's mission is ViaSat-3, and we do have 2 secondary payloads on board as well from Gravity and Astranis. That is the Gravity Space 1 and Astranis's micro-geo satellite.
Those two
You're just now
satellites are
joining us. We're
just
currently
hitching a
in the
ride.
middle of the first of 3 burns for this MVAC engine today. The next event coming up is in just under a minute and 15 seconds. We will have SECO 1, or what we call second engine cutoff 1. And that will end the first of those 3 burns.
That will basically be putting them into a low Earth
Today's
orbit.
mission marks SpaceX's 28th launch this year, 227th overall mission to date, and our 5th operational Falcon Heavy mission.
Pretty crazy that they have so many rocket launches at this point. But we should see more of this Falcon Heavy. It's true. It's really a nice one to watch, especially with those side boosters and all the action that they create.
Stage 2 FTS has safed.
Now on your right-hand screen, you can see the MVAC engine.
Stage 2 has entered terminal guidance.
And we're getting good call-outs there. On the bottom right-hand of your screen, you can see the speed of the second stage as well as the altitude. And you could see that MVAC engine
So it
beginning
looks
to
like
shut down.
we
Did hear a
have
call out
just
for
shut down.
expected loss of signal.
Everything appears to be nominal. They're in the correct orbit. Yeah, perfect.
And we got confirmation of good orbit. So with confirmation of second engine cutoff and a good orbit, we'll be heading into a coast phase until our second relight of our MVAC engine around the T plus 30-minute mark. We'll come back to bring you live coverage of that second burn in about 20 minutes. So until then, sit back and enjoy the space tunes.
All right. It looks like we have a successful launch of the Falcon Heavy. And I have to say that the shots of the Falcon Heavy ascending were truly incredible. I'm actually just going to go back and kind of explain exactly what you're seeing and why it's happening that way. So if we just kind of come back to the launch here, where was it? Like in this section. So right around here, you can see here that the exhaust is basically reflecting the sunlight from the upper atmosphere. So it's dark on the ground, but the sun is still up if you get high enough up there. And this is what's creating this weird jellyfish kind of effect. And the reason why the gases are expanding so much is because, of course, you're higher up in the atmosphere. And so the rocket nozzle is designed to let gases out at sea level. But up in the atmosphere like that, there's way less pressure. So the gases just expand out. And that's what creates this weird effect with this happening like this. In this shot, where you see kind of the red flame, that's when basically the tracking camera is switching to a different ISO. I think it's actually looking in the infrared range. So yeah, it definitely creates some weird effects when it comes to the launch. Keep an eye out for whenever these rockets are launching at dawn or at dusk, because this is when you're going to get to see these interesting effects with the upper atmosphere. And especially if you're able to be at the launch site, that can really be a cool light show to watch while this is happening. Definitely don't miss a launch that is happening at this time if you have the possibility. It's always worth it. In the meantime, I think all of the exciting parts of the mission are pretty much have occurred at this point. They're going to be in a coast phase now for the next 20 to 30 minutes. What's going to happen at this point is the rocket has inserted itself into a low Earth orbit. It's going to perform another burn where it's going to take itself from that low Earth orbit into the geostationary transfer orbit, which is going to be that elliptical orbit. They need to add about 5,000 kilometers per hour of delta V in order to get into that elliptical orbit. Then there's going to be about a 5-hour period where they're going to coast up to the apogee of that orbit, and then they're going to do a circularization. So that's kind of the task list for the next couple of hours during this mission. But unfortunately, I can't stay here all night for all of that. It's super late at night here. It's like 2:30 in the morning. So I think we're going to close down the stream for today. But I think the overall point is that Falcon Heavy has had a successful launch. We're finally able to see it once again. It's always exciting to watch this vehicle launch because it's a bit of a rarity. And yeah, looking forward to when the next one comes. There's a lot of them scheduled for this year, so hopefully it's a site that we get to see a couple more times. And we'll also get to see in the next ones a recovery of those boosters, which is always something that was a bit missing from today. Anyways, in the meantime, guys, I hope that you stay curious and remember to expand your horizons.